All right. So the last part of the introductory lecture और अभी पहले शुरू में हमने क्या क्या explain किया? Let me do a recap. What is the purpose of studying this course? What should be the key questions which are related to organization design? And then very, very important is that what are the current challenges? What are the current challenges? And as I told you, these are the opportunities as well as the problems. And uh, so which are relevant in today's day and age. Uh, so for all organizations, it is important to respond to these changes, right? Historically, when we look at the historical perspectives, historically, what kind of the management systems and the um, organizational uh, were existing in a historical perspective, right? Or looking at it from the managerial uh, point of view and management theory. So, during different times, what are the kind of organizations which have existed and they were suitable for that time, but now the perspectives they have kept changing over the time from the historical perspective, from the classical perspective of the 19th century, which were explained by Frederick Prince Rotere in Scientific Management, Henry Fioul, and Max Weber. So those were the classical perspective. If we look at it from the management side, and the neoclassical perspectives as well. So these have shaped up the way organization theory has emerged. But from if we consider the current challenges again, these are these classical and neoclassical perspectives are have to be adapted to become relevant in today's time and age, right? So not that they are not useful anymore, but their new adaptations help to address the challenges of the current day and age, right? And because the response to the changes was slow. So, therefore, the new modern and postmodern forms of organizations have developed. And so, the contingency perspective is the modern perspective, right? Which talks in terms of finding the best fit between the situational factors and the organizational factors, and as well as the postmodern perspective, which I emphasize so much because this is the perspective which is particularly configured to the challenges of the 21st century, right? The challenges which I have already pointed out. Now, last I was discussing about what is a postmodern organization. So for that, first you need to understand what is an organization. So what are these four important aspects of an organization? If any entity fulfills it, then it is an organization. So definitely uh, it is on its own. It has an entity. It is registered, right? Uh, Distinct from the entities of the owners or the employees. It has a distinct entity of its own, right? And it is goal directed. It is coordinated. It coordinates activities, right? Even if it is not necessarily have to have a particular uh, building where all these activities are taking place. It can happen online as well, but the activities of the organization uh, are deliberately structured, right? Strategically structured, actually, and it is linked to the external environment. Now, provided these all four aspects are being completed in such a way as I've written down over here very clearly, greatest importance is given to human uh, resources, and the creativity of human beings and employees are empowered and given space to perform their activities themselves. And similarly, there is a lot of horizontal communication and coordination of activities, and different functional teams work on projects instead of having very clear cut boundaries. They are in fact collaborative. Um, you can say uh, collaborate there's a collaborative environment and strategic partnerships which are functioning, and so therefore there is the design is much more flexible for the best diffusion of innovation and knowledge, right? And then again, the constant interaction with customers, suppliers, and even competitors is is the kind of organization which is configured to the challenges of the 21st century, and that is what is called a postmodern organization. Now, any organization, let us look at what is organization design. Organization design refers to the managerial functions of deliberately structuring and coordinating organizational resources to achieve the organizational purpose, right? तो ये जो इसकी स्ट्रक्चरिंग है और कोऑर्डिनेशन है, ठीक, किसी भी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के की यानी स्ट्रक्चरिंग से मुराद क्या कि ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के जो रिसोर्सेज हैं और उसमें ह्यूमन रिसोर्सेज शामिल हैं, वो किस तरह से कोऑर्डिनेटेड हैं, that is part of the organization design. When that everything is done in a strategic manner, then we will call it organizational design. So what is kept in mind is what the organizational purpose is, what is it producing, what are the kind of services it is given, and what are its real goals. Now, keeping that in mind, whatever the resources are, whether they are financial, whether they are human, whether they are technological, how are they strategically placed, and do they how does each resource combine with the other? That is what organization design is. Now, to understand this more, we can see that organization design has two aspects. One is the structural aspect or the structural dimension, and the other is the contextual dimension, right? So, in order to have organization design, these two dimensions are critical, right? So, let us look at first the structural dimension. This dimension provides the labels to describe the internal characteristics. So, when the internal characteristics uh, uh, are determined, uh, and the keeping in mind what are the strategic goals and keeping in mind the strategic options, then it becomes the organizational design. So these are the important characteristics which define internally what an organization will look like. So first is the formalization. Formalization means an organization, the documentation within the organization, right? And these documentation can be the policy manuals, regulations, or the HR documents. To what extent are they actually written down, and some kind of a record is kept of all these documentation. So the organization can be more formalized where there's a lot of paperwork, or it can be less formal and more informal. Completely informal organizations are those which will have absolutely no kind of record, everything is just simply understood. But remember that completely informal organizations cannot be designed in a particular manner, ठीक है? तो इसलिए हम एक फॉर्मल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, एक रजिस्टर्ड फॉर्मल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन की ही बात कर रहे हैं। बट एनीवे फॉर्मलाइजेशन जो है वो एक एस्पेक्ट है ऑर्गेनाइजेशन डिजाइन का। अब ये जो डॉक्यूमेंटेशन है, जो पेपर वर्क है, ये इसका एक ऑप्टिमल लेवल होना चाहिए, यानी बहुत कम भी नहीं, बहुत ज्यादा भी नहीं। लेकिन पहली बात ये है कि एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में किस हद तक फॉर्मलाइजेशन है, फिर पेपर वर्क है, थिंग्स आर रिटन डाउन। सेकंड इज स्पेशलाइजेशन, to which the degree to which organizational tasks are subdivided into separate jobs, which means how many different kind of tasks are being done, right? Specialization means different departments which are doing a particular task. जितनी जितनी बड़ी एक organization होती जाती है, वहाँ पे specialization ज़्यादा हो सकती है। इसी तरह जो छोटी organization है, वहाँ एक ही बंदा हर चीज़ कर रहा होता है, तो वहाँ specialization कम होती है। ऑफ कोर्स स्पेशलाइजेशन के भी फायदे भी हैं, नुकसानात भी हैं। ज़्यादा स्पेशलाइजेशन अगर होगी तो डेफिनिटली द कॉस्ट ऑफ डूइंग दैट टास्क्स कैन कम डाउन, बट एट द कॉस्ट ऑफ कम्युनिकेशन। ज़्यादा स्पेशलाइजेशन के लिए ज़रूरी है कि आपकी जो है ना वो प्रोग्रामिंग ज़्यादा हो। ज़्यादा स्पेशलाइजेशन मीन्स मोर प्रोग्रामिंग मीन्स लेस क्रिएटिविटी। So specialization, just like formalization, also you have to find an optimal level for that. अब आ जाए तीसरी चीज structural dimension की, which is hierarchy of authority, means who reports to whom and span of control for each manager. The hierarchy is related to span of control, the number of employees reporting to a supervisor. When span of controls are narrow, ठीक है, the hierarchy tends to be tall, which means span of controls are in a large organization. ठीक है, यहाँ पे हम इमेजिन करें कि इट्स अ लार्ज ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, एक लार्ज ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है जहाँ स्पैन ऑफ कंट्रोल नैरो है, वहाँ पे हायरार्की जो है वो टॉल होगी। उसका रीजन ये है कि बहुत सारे लेवल्स होंगे एक हायरार्की में, और जो टॉप मैनेजमेंट है उसका और जो ऑपरेशनल मैनेजमेंट है, जो बिल्कुल एट द फ्रंट एंड लेवल, उनमें बहुत ज्यादा डिस्टेंस होगा। तो उसको हम एक टॉल हायरार्की कहेंगे, जहाँ यहाँ पे कंट्रोल अच्छा हो सकता है। मिलिट्री ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस फॉर एग्जांपल, they have these spans of control can be narrow so that there is stricter control, ठीक, strict control and very little autonomy. जब आपको ज्यादा ऑटोनॉमी की जरूरत होती है तो उस वक्त आपका वाइड स्पैन ऑफ कंट्रोल होता है और हायरार्की जो है वो शॉर्टर होती है, ठीक है। अगर हायरार्की आपको देखनी है ना, तो आपको विजुअली आप देख सकते हैं व्हेन यू कंस्ट्रक्ट द ऑर्गेनाइजेशनल चार्ट्स। तो आप ये देखेंगे कि ऑर्गेनाइजेशनल चार्ट्स के अंदर आप देखेंगे कि कितने उसके अंदर लेवल्स हैं और कितना नैरो है या कितना ब्रॉड है। जो ब्रॉड है ना ऑर्गेनाइजेशनल चार्ट, अगर ब्रॉड हो उसका मतलब ये होता है कि जो टॉप मैनेजमेंट है और जो ऑपरेशनल मैनेजमेंट है बिल्कुल फर्स्ट लेवल की, उसके अंदर ज्यादा डिस्टेंस नहीं है। तो इसकी भी अपने फ़ायदे नुकसानात हैं। जब स्पैन ऑफ कंट्रोल नैरो होगा, तो उस वक़्त जो है वो कंट्रोल ज़्यादा होगा, लेकिन कम्युनिकेशन कम होगी। इसी तरह जब स्पैन ऑफ कंट्रोल वाइड है, उस वक़्त आपका कंट्रोल तो इतना ज़्यादा नहीं होगा, लेकिन जो आपके एम्प्लॉइज़ हैं, उनके पास ऑटोनॉमी ज़्यादा होगी, so they can use their creativity better. So this also needs to be um, uh, given the conditions, and there is a right level of hierarchy. अब आ जाए सेंट्रलाइजेशन पे। सेंट्रलाइजेशन का मतलब क्या है कि हु इज मेकिंग द डिसीजन refers to the hierarchical authority that has authority to make a decision. Exactly, when decision making is kept at the top level, the organization is centralized, right? तो जो बेसिक सेंट्रलाइजेशन का मतलब है कि जो मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट डिसीजंस हैं वो किधर हो रहे हैं। अगर वो टॉप मैनेजमेंट कर रही है सारे डिसीजंस, उसने डेलीगेट नहीं किया हुआ, डिसेंट्रलाइज नहीं किया हुआ, तो वो सेंट्रलाइज्ड है। और अगर रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटीज और अथॉरिटी को डेलीगेट कर दिया गया है टुवर्ड्स लोअर लेवल्स, यानी कि जो मिडिल मैनेजमेंट है वो भी अपने डिसीजंस इंडिपेंडेंटली ले सकती है, तो वहां पे सेंट्रलाइजेशन जो है वो कम होगी और डिसेंट्रलाइज स्ट्रक्चर होगा। अगेन सेंट्रलाइजेशन का फायदा ये है कि देर इज मोर कंट्रोल, देर इज मोर स्टेबिलिटी, एवरीबडी फॉलोज द सेम रूल। बट जो डिसेंट्रलाइज सिस्टम्स हैं वहाँ पे ये है कि दे आर लेस रूल्स एंड सो देयर इज मोर स्पेस for the middle and operational level managers to decide for themselves given the circumstances. So again, a centralization has its pros and cons, and the right level of centralization needs to be found out, right? Professionalism is the level of formal education and training of employees. So professionalism का मतलब क्या हुआ कि to what extent the employees working in the organizations, they are self-driven, how educated they are, how much they need to be, how much they need to be instructed. So the more professionalism, the more not only educated but skilled, more importantly, the more skilled individuals are part of the organization, the more professionalism there is, and then the more autonomy can be given, right? And so therefore, Professionalism is generally measured as the average number of years of education of the employee. So it's education as well as actually it's also skill. If there is a professional workforce, highly professional workforce, it does not need to be it controlled that much. It is self-controlled. Where there is a lack of professionalism, and it is the generalists are making up the organizations who are not very well uh, aware of their own job, right? Then definitely in those areas, then you need more hierarchy, and um, you need more control. Personnel ratios. Personnel ratios means the number of people deployed in various function and departments. So you see, this is a time of hybrid organizations, which means that the entire organization under coming under the same umbrella, the different departments, they may be structured different, right? So some departments need fewer people, so there'll be fewer people there. Other departments need more people. Maybe the production department needs a lot of labor, but at the same time, let's say there is an independent department which is looking after the CSR. Okay, so if so, only 2 3 people may be a part of that department. Whereas in the production department there may be thousands of people who are working as labor. So professional ratios are also calculated again depending upon the requirement of the different departments. Personnel ratios include the administrative ratio, the clerical ratio, the professional staff ratio, and the ratio of indirect to direct labor employees. A personnel ratio is measured by dividing the number of employed in a classification by the total number of organizational employees. So, as I told you, that it would you get to know which is the larger departments in terms of employees and which is the smaller ones. It all depends whether the department is large or small, depends upon the functions which it is performing. So but it needs to be evaluated never the same. So uh, these five are the dimensions which help you establish the internal characteristics of the organization, which is called as the structural dimension. The other thing which can be which is part of the organization design, or which is considered whenever an organization design thinking is being established, is the contextual dimension. Now, the contextual dimension characterizes the whole organization, describing the organizational setting that influences and shapes the structural dimension. So, structural dimension, basically, you can look at this diagram. As you can see, this is the structural dimension, which means what the organization looks like internally. And then these are certain factors which set the stage for this structure to be finalized, right? So these are the what I was telling you. The situational factors. These are the important situational factors or settings in which the internal structure or the structural dimension needs to be figured out. Because as I told you, there can be levels of formalization, specialization, hierarchy, centralization, professionalism, and personnel ratios. What a level is the best, right? That is determined by the setting, which is also called as the contextual dimension. Now, or the setting in which the structural dimension takes place. So this needs to be understood very well before any kind of structural design can happen, right? So this is first is the size of the organization, and by size we mean not only geographical size, but particularly about the number of employees and other measures, like for example the total sales or the total assets, etc. That makes up the size of the organization. A large organization would have a large number of employees. Similarly, it would have a large level of sales and total assets, etc. Now, the second cultural characteristic is the organizational technology, which means that the tools, techniques, and actions used to transform the inputs into outputs, right? So, organizational technology, the level to which technology is being used to uh, produce the output, that is a very important cultural factor. So organizations which are using a lot of technology, their internal structure or their structural dimension will be impacted accordingly. The environment. Now, the environment consists of the economic, social, and political conditions in which the organization is operating. So, the industry, the government, the customers, suppliers, and the financial community. They become all part of the environment. So this is basically um, the so as you can see from here, it is the economic, social, and political conditions in which uh, the organization is operating. It has an impact on the way these organization is structured internally. The goals and strategy of the organization, again, these are sometimes and many times these are decided before the organization starts functioning. So these goals and strategies will always determine the direction the company will take, and the decisions which will be made according to those goals and strategies, and how those goals will be achieved. Strategies, of course, will keep on adapting to the goals. Goals usually do not change that quickly. There's a reason why a company comes into existence or an organization comes into existence, and those are the goals. So uh, it is they remain quite stable, but the strategy to achieve the goals, that also is determined, is predetermined. That's why there's strategic thinking, but it also keeps on changing. So tactical differences keep on changing. And then there's the organization's culture. This is the beliefs, norms, and the which are the employees share. That's the organizational culture. What are the values and norms pertaining to ethical behavior, commitment to employees, efficiency, customer service. So that is the culture of the organization. Okay? It's many times unwritten. Remember that. So formalization is one thing, which means that things which are written down, the rules and the regulations. Culture is not something written down, but it is known by everyone, right? It is the beliefs and the norms. It is known by everyone. Those unwritten, unsaid things which everyone knows. And what constitutes as what is right, what is wrong, what is moral, what is immoral, though that is all part of the organization's culture, and it is very pervasive, and it's extremely important. The founders of the organization, generally, they are the ones who bring themselves to the culture of the organization, right? And it is impacted by the culture in which the organization was initially started, right? It has an impact even when it goes global. That culture tends to remain with it to some extent, the beliefs and the norms, but this culture then adapts when the organization becomes a global organization, and it has to operate in different cultures. It adapts accordingly, right? But it is important. It is important. It is not very easy. This culture, it evolves over time. It can't be designed that easily. But on the other hand, these structural dimensions are something which can be designed, whereas the contextual dimensions are those situational factors which are taken into consideration when determining the internal structure or the structural dimension. Now, uh, this whole idea behind design is for two reasons: for gaining efficiency and for becoming effective. What is efficiency means? Refers to the amount of resources used to achieve the organization goals. So efficiency means that with the minimal of the resources, or using the resources most judiciously, the organization goals are achieved. If the quantity of raw material, money, and employee effort, which is necessary to produce at a certain level, uh, and that that quantity, ठीक है, that amount or quantity, the manager always keeps an eye that unnecessary resources are not being spent in a particular aspect, right? So the money is used um, after a lot of deliberation, and so utilization of every kind of resources and putting it to the best possible use given the organizational goals. This is the efficiency. ठीक हो गया ना? Efficiency. So if time, for example, is a very important resource. Wherever time is saved, it means that efficiency is being gained. That's an example. Okay. Similarly, money is a very financial resources are very important. Wherever cost is being saved, it means that the organization is becoming more efficient. So, for gaining the maximum efficiency, organization can be seen as in the form of a machine, because machine can get the maximum efficiency, and whichever component is not allowing for that efficiency to happen, right? That component can be changed. But this efficiency, whereas it is extremely important and it helps the organization to survive and to become, you see, to grow over time, this efficiency helps in stabilizing the organization. But at the same time, there may be some activities which are important for the organization goal, diversity, for example, which may not pass the efficiency criteria, but nevertheless, it is important for the effectiveness. Effectiveness means to what extent the goals are being achieved, right? So, this is efficiency means to what extent the organization's resources are being used optimally. To what extent the costs are being controlled, to what extent control is being executive, to what extent there is stability. This is all efficiency. Effectiveness is to what extent are the goals being achieved, right? An effective organization is that which is achieving, which is focused on its goal, and does the strategic thinking in order to ensure that none of its goals are being sidelined, but the mission is being accomplished. Okay. So the point is that effectiveness, managers carefully balance the needs and interests of various stakeholders in setting goals. So because here we are talking about goals, as I think I've mentioned it before in the first part of this lecture, how important it is to understand that goals are not very narrowly defined but broadly defined, right? So I was telling you about that. We can, for this purpose, we can look at the stakeholder approach. I told you that it is the demands of the stakeholders needs to be kept in mind before the goals are determined, right? Stakeholders, any group within or outside of the organization that has a stake in the organization's performance. Now, over here, you can see what are the different stakeholders in the organization. So, definitely, customers customers are very, very important, because to provide them with the highest value, that should be the goal of the organization, giving them the highest value. Then comes the investors. Of course, they want financial responsibility as well as credit worthiness. Then the management itself, which wants the effectiveness but not at the cost of efficiency. Then the government, which wants compliance to its rules. Then the workers unions, they can be also they want so the unions are also stakeholders, because they want maximum benefit for the workers. The community, the local community on the whole, is expecting corporate social responsibility. The suppliers, they are expecting satisfactory transactions and to be treated as partners, not just that they are being asked to minimize their costs. but treated as strategic partners, and the stockholders and employees definitely, who may be part of a particular union. So the goals need to be such which satisfy all of these different stakeholders. So finally, we are looking at the last part, which is the organizational configuration. As I told you, the configuration is very much like configuring a computer and determining what its default is going to be. So here you can say configuration means what are the parts of the organization and how do the parts fit together, right? So then the parts of the organization and the fitting together of these parts, so that the organization is responding the to the requirements of efficiency as well as effectiveness, parts of the organization and fitting together of these parts. That's the way Henry Mintzberg looks at it. So there can be many ways in which organizational configuration can be achieved. So I am now here discussing with you a model which was presented by Henry Mintzberg. And in order to understand configuration, he first looked at the parts and then how the parts fits together. So this is the idea given by Henry Mintzberg. He says that organization has 5 parts. Every organization can be seen as being consisting as consisting of 5 parts. First is the technical core. The technical core includes people who do the basic work of the organization. This part actually produces the product and service output of the organization. This is where the primary transformation from inputs to outputs takes place. The technical core is the production department in a manufacturing firm, or for example, if it's a university, then it's the teachers. For example, if it's the hospital, then it's the doctors and the paramedic staff, etc. So this is the technical core. Then technical support. The technical support helps the organization adapt to the environment. Technical support, such as engineers, research, and information technology professionals, scan the environment for problems, opportunities, and technological development. Technological support is responsible for creating innovations in the technical core. ठीक है, दूसरी चीज आ जाती है आपकी टेक्निकल सपोर्ट. नो, ये कोर और उसकी सपोर्ट जो कि which will help to bring about innovation into the technological core. So this is also very important. Sometimes it's ignored, but this component nevertheless is very important for a postmodern organization. Then you have administrative support. The administrative support function is responsible for smooth operation and upkeep of the organization, including its physical and human resource elements. ठीक है, ये जो admin department है उसको हम उसको ये कह रहे हैं. It includes human resource activities. सो कुछ लोग उसको जो है वो एचआर कहते हैं. ठीक है, एचआर इज पार्ट ऑफ दैट. बट अदर देन एचआर, कई दफा एचआर और एडमिन को ऑर्गेनाइजेशन ने अलग अलग भी वो डिस्क्राइब करते हैं, लेकिन हेनरी मिन्सबर्ग इसको एक ही जगह वो कहता है ये वो हैं जो कि सपोर्ट फंक्शन परफॉर्म कर रहे हैं उसकी फिजिकल और ह्यूमन एलिमेंट्स के लिए. ठीक है, technical support is something else. Technical support is that which is providing and or enabling the technical core. This is the which is uh, uh, supporting the physical elements or logistics. ठीक है, यहाँ पे logistics और इसी तरह logistics का मतलब क्या हुआ कि भाई जो आपके जो आपकी कनेक्शन है बिटवीन द सप्लायर्स एक्सेट्रा, वो यहाँ पे डिटरमिन हो रहा होता है. अच्छा जी, अब आगे टॉप मैनेजमेंट जो कि प्लानिंग करती है, स्ट्रेटजी करती है, गोल्स और पॉलिसीज वगैरह डिटरमिन करती है, और मिडिल मैनेजमेंट जो है वो रिस्पॉन्सिव, वो इम्प्लीमेंटेशन करती है. ठीक है, so middle management does the implementation, top management makes the higher level strategies. For example, board वगैरह है, middle management है या आपका इसको टॉप मैनेजमेंट में एक वर्ड यूज होता है सी सूट. इसको जाके देखें, सी कैपिटल सी SUITE, सी सूट क्या चीज होती है, आप लोग जाके देखें. बाय द वे, लेक्चर में मैं जो भी चीज कहूंगी ना वो मैं इम्तिहान में दे सकती हूँ. तो टॉप मैनेजमेंट मीन्स सी सूट. एंड मिडल मैनेजमेंट क्या चीज़ है, इम्प्लीमेंटेशन एंड कोऑर्डिनेशन एट डिपार्टमेंट लेवल। और अगर एक ब्यूरोक्रेटिक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है, उसके अंदर मिडल मैनेजमेंट जो है वो इंफॉर्मेशन की फिल्टरिंग भी करती है। तो ये तो हो गए इसके 5 पार्ट्स। अगर आप उसकी डायग्राम में देखो तो वो इस तरह है, देखो ये आ गया आपका टेक्निकल सपोर्ट और ये आ गया एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव सपोर्ट। ये आपका जो टेक्निकल कोर है उसको सपोर्ट कर रहा है और ओवरऑल एक सपोर्टिव रोल प्ले कर रहा है। ये जो 3 टेक्निकल कोर यानी कि आपकी ऑपरेशनल मैनेजमेंट भी कह सकते हो, इसने इसको टेक्निकल कोर का नाम दिया है। ठीक है? जो जो एक्चुअली प्रोडक्ट या सर्विस डिलीवर कर रहे हैं, फिर मिडल मैनेजमेंट, टॉप मैनेजमेंट जो है वो स्ट्रैटेजी बनाती है। टेक्निकल सपोर्ट और एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव सपोर्ट, इसकी इसकी डेफिनेशंस उन्होंने दी हैं। अब ज़रा ये गौर से देखो, ये देखो जी गौर से देखो। ये इन दोनों चीज़ों को ठहरे मैं आपको अब आगे जो आपने समझना है ना वो ये एक्सक्यूज़ मी, इसको समझने के लिए ये देखना पड़ेगा। हुँ, अब आप अगर देखो, पहला जो वो दिखा रहा है वो आप इस यानी ये एंटरप्रेन्योरियल स्ट्रक्चर है। एंटरप्रेन्योरियल स्ट्रक्चर क्या है? जहाँ पे अलग से आपको टेक्निकल सपोर्ट और एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव डिपार्टमेंट्स नहीं नज़र आ रहे हैं, ठीक है ना? ये एंटरप्रेन्योरियल स्ट्रक्चर है और एक एंटरप्रेन्योर है ऊपर और बाकी जो सब काम है ना वो सारे लोग मिलके मिडल मैनेजमेंट और एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव सपोर्ट, टेक्निकल सपोर्ट सब मिलके वो परफॉर्म कर रहे हैं। फिर आ गया आपका मशीन ब्यूरोक्रेसी जिसके अंदर आप देखो कि ये काफ़ी टॉल स्ट्रक्चर इसका होगा। ये जो है ना, ये एंटरप्रेन्योरियल स्ट्रक्चर ये टॉल नहीं है, ये फ्लैट है, ये टॉल स्ट्रक्चर है। मशीन ब्यूरोक्रेसी का टॉल स्ट्रक्चर है, इसमें बड़ा क्लियर टेक्निकल सपोर्ट भी है, बड़ी क्लियर एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव सपोर्ट भी है और एक टॉल सा स्ट्रक्चर है। ये अभी इसको हम देखते हैं। अब आ जाएँ आप एक प्रोफ़ेशनल ब्यूरोक्रेसी में। अब प्रोफ़ेशनल ब्यूरोक्रेसी के अंदर जो है, वो क्योंकि प्रोफ़ेशनलिज़्म ज़्यादा है, इसलिए यहाँ पे भी एक शॉर्ट स्ट्रक्चर है। उनको इतनी ज़्यादा टेक्निकल सपोर्ट की ज़रूरत नहीं है, वो यूजुअली प्रोफ़ेशनल खुद होते हैं। उनको एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव सपोर्ट की ज़्यादा ज़रूरत होती है। अब आप आ जाओ फिर एक डाइवर्सिफ़ाइड फ़ॉर्म पे, जहाँ पे अगेन जो है वो डिफरेंट यूनिट्स हैं। आपकी विदिन इट्स अ लार्ज ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, डिफरेंट यूनिट्स ऑपरेटिंग अ लिटिल बिट डिफरेंटली। ये भी अगर आप यहाँ देखो तो इनको इतनी ज़्यादा टेक्निकल सपोर्ट की अलग से ज़रूरत नहीं है। इनको एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव सपोर्ट की ज़्यादा ज़रूरत होती है। और डिफरेंट डिपार्टमेंट्स हैं व्हिच आर स्ट्रक्चर्ड वेरी डिफरेंटली, इसको डाइवर्सिफाइड फॉर्म का इसने नाम दिया। और फिर ये आ जाओ एडहोक्रेसी में। एडहोक्रेसी में क्लियरली एक चीज़ देखो कि इसमें इन्होंने टेक्निकल सपोर्ट और एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव सपोर्ट अलग से नहीं दिखाई हुई, वो एक ही जगह उन्होंने उसको कर दिया क्योंकि ये बड़ा एक फ्लूइड सा किस्म का एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन जो है ना वो स्ट्रक्चर उन्होंने आपको दिखाया है। अब वो कहता है ये है कि ये जो 5 उसने आपको पार्ट्स बताए थे, हेनरी मिन्सबर्ग कहता है कि जो 5 आपके जो 5 पार्ट्स थे, उनको अगर उनको कोऑर्डिनेट करके जैसे यहाँ दिखाया है, दे कैन बी ही सेज दैट दे कैन बी 5 टाइप्स ऑफ ऑर्गनाइजेशंस। जहाँ पे उसने पहले तो एक एंटरप्रेन्योरियल स्ट्रक्चर आपको दिखाया है। अब एंटरप्रेन्योरियल स्ट्रक्चर की डिटेल उन्होंने बताई है, जैसे मैंने आपको यहाँ पे भी कहा है। टिपिकली स्टार्टअप कंपनी, एक स्टार्टअप कंपनी है, मेनली ऑफ टॉप मैनेजर, और वही जो एंटरप्रेन्योर है वो ही वर्क्स अलोंग विद अदर अदर टेक्निकल स्टाफ, और उसने कोई अलग से जो है ना वो कोई सपोर्ट स्टाफ नहीं रखा हुआ। दे परफॉर्म एंड द एंटरप्रेन्योर सिंपली गाइड्स व्हाट टू डू, राइट? So the organization is managed and coordinated by direct supervision from top. यूजुअली पता है क्या है कि इनकी साइज भी कम होता है। जो स्टार्टअप है ना, ये वो कंपनी है जिसने नया-नया जो है वो एक बिज़नेस शुरू किया है, तो ज़ाहिर है कि उसके अंदर उसका साइज़ तो वैसे ही कम होगा। तो लेकिन इसके अंदर जो सबसे ज़्यादा ज़रूरत है वो ये कि डायरेक्ट सुपरविज़न होनी चाहिए। और तो वो डायरेक्ट सुपरविज़न तब बेहतर तभी रहेगा जब आपका जो है वो जैसे पहले इसने इंटरनल स्ट्रक्चर आपको बताया था, साइज़ तो उसका ऑलरेडी कम है। और इसी तरह उसके अंदर जो हायरार्की है वो भी कम होगी, ठीक है? स्पैन हायरार्की इज़ शॉर्टर, और इट्स जो उसका स्ट्रक्चर है वो होगा ब्रॉड एंड उसकी जो नॉट वेरी टॉल, ठीक है। ये इसका स्ट्रक्चर सबसे ज़्यादा एक entrepreneurial structure is suitable है for a startup. So there is little formalization or specialization. The primary goal of is to survive and become established. Formalization और specialization कम होगी और it is suited to a dynamic environment. So ये जो startup culture है ये भी एक जो आपकी post modern organization है उसे सूट करता है, ये startup का स्ट्रक्चर जिसको वो एंटरप्रेन्योरियल स्ट्रक्चर कह रहे हैं। अब आ जाओ आप एक टिपिकल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन की तरफ, ठीक है। ओल्ड फैशन्ड ऑर्गेनाइजेशन कैन बी कॉल्ड मशीन ब्यूरोक्रेसी। दिस इज ओल्ड फैशन ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, वेरी मेच्योर और टेक्निकल कोर इज ऑफन ओरिएंटेड टू मैस प्रोडक्शन, जो मैस प्रोड्यूस करती है, ठीक है ना। टिपिकल किस्म की ओल्ड फैशन ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को मशीन ब्यूरोक्रेसी कहा जा रहा है। अच्छा जी, दिस फॉर्म रिफ्लेक्ट्स एक्सटेंसिव फॉर्मलाइजेशन एंड स्पेशलाइजेशन। जो टिपिकल आपकी पब्लिक सेक्टर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन होती है ना, वो मशीन ब्यूरोक्रेसी बन जाती हैं। इट वुड नॉट डू वेल, ठीक है। जो टिपिकल आपकी पब्लिक सेक्टर ब्यूरोक्रेसीज हैं वो मशीन ब्यूरोक्रेसीज बन जाती हैं विद दिस अ लॉट ऑफ फॉर्मलाइजेशन, लॉट ऑफ पेपर वर्क, लॉट ऑफ स्पेशलाइजेशन, and the whole idea is to create probably only efficiency. So effectiveness criteria are very narrowly defined, right, for the machine bureaucracies. These are not very well adapted to the modern or postmodern organizational environment. Still, at least Pakistan has many of them, and they've become a very big problem for us because they are not configured to the requirements of the 21st century. Pakistan has many of them. फॉर एग्जाम्पल अगर आप देख लें जो हमारी स्टील मिल है वो मशीन ब्यूरोक्रेसी बन गई थी और उसके बाद जो उसका हाल हुआ है वो आपके सामने ही है। पीआईए वाज बिकमिंग अ मशीन ब्यूरोक्रेसी, अगेन आपके सामने ही है उसका हाल। सो दे रियली नॉट अडेप्टेड टू एग्जिस्ट इन दी प्रेजेंट टाइम एंड एज। और जो ऑर्गेनाइजेशन चाहे वो यूनिवर्सिटी या हॉस्पिटल हो, जो मशीन ब्यूरोक्रेसी बन जाएगी उसमें यू गोइंग टू हैव मेनी मेनी प्रॉब्लम्स। प्रोफेशनल ब्यूरोक्रेसी, यस इट इज, दे कैन एग्जिस्ट इन कॉम्प्लेक्स एनवायरमेंट्स। और इसमें आप देखो कि प्रोफेशनल ब्यूरोक्रेसी ये आपको यहाँ पे दिखा रहे हैं। प्रोफेशनल ब्यूरोक्रेसी वो है अगेन जो जिसमें जो टॉल स्ट्रक्चर नहीं है बल्कि फ्लैट है, राइट। उसमें हायरार्की उसी तरह एस्टैब्लिश्ड है कि फ्लैट है, सो लाइंस ऑफ कम्युनिकेशन आर क्लियर। यू डू हैव अ लार्ज administrative support because they can be quite large, and so the rules and regulations are very clearly set out. But the most importance is given to this level, which is the technical code, and the entire effort is to support this technical code. So you need as many technical people as possible. So अगर machine bureaucracies जो हमारी typical public sector organizations हैं वो professional bureaucracies बन जाएं तो they can exist in complex environments. ये आपने देखना है कि professional bureaucracy वो बन सकती है कि नहीं. So professional bureaucracies can operate. They are quite modern. You can't say that they are postmodern, but at least they are modern. They are not old and archaic like these machine bureaucracies. जो आपकी military है वो एक professional bureaucracy बन सकती है या वो एक diversified form भी ले सकती है. Organizations are mature firms that are extremely large and subdivided into small groups. ठीक है, यहाँ पे देखो ये वाली subdivided into small groups उसको वो बता रहा है. Support staff is needed to support the professionals. Again, ये याद रखें कि आजकल के ज़माने में the professional having professional competence is very, very extremely important, right? Okay. And the diversified form has that, but it is a very large organization nevertheless. तो हमारी military जो है वो diversified form भी adopt कर सकती है. So I would say अगर आप पूछें